The COVID-19 virus was created as a bioweapon against humanity, according to Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has painstakingly compiled a 2,000-page report forensically detailing the crimes of the US deep state and globalist elites. According to Putin, Big Pharma and US deep state actors are guilty of manufacturing the COVID-19 pandemic to take over the world. And the 2,000-page report lists Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and George Soros as co-conspirators in the plot against humanity. Putin has been prepared to bide his time while collecting the evidence. But according to Russian sources, the president understands that the time has come to blow the lid of the globalist charade and educate the masses about the agenda of the elite. Before we dive in, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and join the People's Voice Locals community for exclusive and uncensored news and views. The link is below this video. Finally, the truth is starting to emerge. Brave men and women all over the world are refusing to submit to the diktats of the globalist elite. And as the people of the world continue waking up to the crimes of the elite, the time has come for justice to be served. Russia wants justice for the creation and release of SARS-CoV-2, while the West covered up the origins and censored scientists and journalists, the Russian embassy in the United States said on Thursday. According to Putin, the global elite left their fingerprints all over the crime scene. Russia has now laid out the evidence in black and white and submitted to the UN over 2,000 pages worth of reports, proving that the globalist elite and US deep state, in cahoots with Big Pharma, are responsible for manufacturing the pandemic. Russia's highest-ranking biological military official just went on TV and accused the US and Big Pharma of releasing bioweapons to rule the world.
Рост заболеваемости нехарактерными инфекциями отмечен в данный момент в ряде стран. И то есть тоже мы можем говорить о том, что это не без помощи американских биологов.
Я думаю, что вот так огульно заявлять, мы же все-таки должностные лица. Ведь биологическое оружие, если посчитать, какой ущерб нанес ковид, то, наверное, будем говорить, за 2 года, да?
Ну, основная такая пандемия 2 года шла.
То даже ее нельзя сравнить с ущербом, который был во Вторую мировую войну. Это в десятки раз больше. Зато выгодоприобретатели той же Big Pharma.
Вы имеете в виду фармацевтические все компании?
Компании, которые в основном находятся у нас там в Соединенных Штатах, это там колоссальные. Как-то вот так.
То есть вопрос
стоит,
да.
Вопросы мы задаем, мы же передаем документы. Вот характерна реакция Соединенных Штатов Америки, про которую мы говорим. Ни одного опровержения тем документам, которые мы предъявили, не было. Мы передали документы, это более, наверное, 2000 листов, в Организацию Объединенных Наций.
Какой ответ пришел?
У нас, как правило, 2 ответа. Один ответ происходит в Соединенных Штатах Америки. У них же он стандартный. Все, что не делается, все делается в интересах национальной безопасности Соединенных Штатов. И нам надо доверять.
Слепо доверять?
Да, слепо доверять. Там политика глобального биологического контроля. Они поняли, что это работает. Что посредством искусственно создаваемых таких кризисных ситуаций биологического характера можно управлять миром. Ведь ничего бесплатно они не делают. И даже поставляя каким-то государствам на безвозмездной основе, она не такая безвозмездная, как они об этом говорят.
Of course, mainstream media in the West is doing everything it can to suppress the report and the news that it even exists. If mainstream media won't do their job, then we'll have to continue filling the breach. After this quick break, we'll explain exactly why the US deep state is determined to ignore the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention. Hint, it has a lot to do with the WEF's open secret regarding eugenics and depopulation. But first, an important word from our sponsor. A shocking new study reveals that power grid loss and blackouts could send half of America to the emergency room this summer. The study states that over tens of thousands of deaths and millions of hospitalizations would occur in the event of an extended power failure. This is why I highly recommend ordering dark age defense before these blackouts strike. Dark Age Defense is the only comprehensive step-by-step guide on how to survive and thrive in a nationwide, extended and life-threatening blackout. Click the link below this video today to receive free shipping, a 100% money-back guarantee, plus several additional free bonuses. Order now by clicking the link down below, and be sure to watch the free video. Remember when the mainstream media were telling us that Fauci's biolabs in Ukraine were just a far-right conspiracy theory? They lost control of that narrative thanks to people like yourself, who refused to believe their lies and demanded to see the evidence. Biden's Pentagon was finally forced to admit that they have operated 46 biolabs in Ukraine under Fauci's control since the early 2000s. Talk about a major humiliation for the mainstream media and their fact-checkers. So, what was the Pentagon's excuse for operating these secret biolabs? Well, apparently they are involved in the US project to rid the world of weapons of mass destruction. Remember the last time the deep state trotted out the weapons of mass destruction lie? That shameless lie led directly to the Iraq War and the humanitarian and economic disaster that followed it, just the way the neocons wanted it to play out. Now, according to Russian officials, the bio-research activities launched by the US Defense Department in Ukraine require an appropriate legal assessment, including from relevant international bodies. Of particular concern is the activity deployed by the Pentagon in Ukraine. The United States has involved dozens of state institutions and private companies of the country in its projects, the embassy stated. Civilians and military personnel of the Republic became donors of biomaterial and simply experimental subjects. There is no doubt that such actions require an appropriate legal assessment, including from relevant international structures, the statement continued. The international community continues to raise serious questions about the uncontrolled dual-use research under the auspices of the US Defense Department. And Russia has repeatedly pointed to gross violations by the United States of its obligations under the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention. According to Russia, there is no question about any good goals of the project of the US Defense Department. Evidence of US work with potential agents of biological weapons is available, and they are far from isolated, as well as evidence of attempts to deliberately enhance the properties of pathogens of economically significant infections. This is very interesting because it corroborates what renowned truth teller Robert F. Kennedy Jr. told Tucker Carlson on his Twitter show last week. Tucker asked Biden's primary challenger about the shadowy biolabs in Ukraine, and RFK Jr.'s jaw-dropping answer should be required viewing for everybody who is still living in the dark about the agenda of the elites.
So let me add, it's an interesting segue, because Toria Nuland kind of blithely announced during congressional testimony last year that, oh, by the way, we have these biolabs in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And that was like kind of ignored, and the people who covered it got attacked for covering it. But the fact remains there are U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. Why would we have biolabs in Ukraine?
We have biolabs in Ukraine because we're developing bioweapons. And, and those bioweapons are using all kinds of new synthetic biology and CRISPR technology and genetic engineering techniques that were not available to previous generation. And they can make frightening stuff. What happened was, when we walked away from, when the Patriot Act reopened the bioweapons arms race in 2001, the Pentagon began putting a lot of money into bioweapons, but they were nervous at that time because if you violate the Geneva Convention, it's a hanging offense. And they weren't sure that that provision in the Patriot Act would actually hold up as a loophole to treaties that have been ratified by Congress.
Did you catch that? Under treaties signed by US Congress, Fauci's crimes in developing bioweapons are punishable by hanging. And as the report released by Russia details, Fauci isn't the only deep state goon caught up in this crime. There is forensic evidence proving Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and George Soros are guilty of the conspiracy against humanity as well. No wonder the Democrats are employing every trick in the book and inventing new ones to avoid losing the 2024 election to Trump.
So they were nervous about actually going full force into bioweapons development. So they transferred the authority for biosecurity to one agency in the HHS called the National Institute for Infectious and Allergic Diseases, run by Anthony Fauci. So Anthony Fauci got all the responsibility for bioweapons development. He got at that time a 68% raise from the Pentagon in order to do that work. So, and that's why he was the highest paid official in the American government of 4 million people in the American He's the high. He gets more money. He got more money, $450,000 a year than the president. That any Supreme Court judge, any member of Congress, he was the highest paid. And it's because he got that 68% raise from the Pentagon to do bioweapons development. Now, when you do bioweapons development, every bioweapon needs a vaccine. So you develop them side by side, because in 100% of the cases when you deploy a bioweapon, there's blowback. Your side also gets sick. So in order to deploy one offensively, you need a vaccine to counter it. So you need to vaccinate your team before you deploy it. So those two things are developed through a field of science called gain-of-function science, where you take an infectious microbe and you amplify its infectivity, or you make it jump species, so it may kill monkeys, now you make it kill humans, and you adopt it that way. And there's all kinds of methods, and then you make it immune to antibiotics and to therapeutic drugs and to other therapies. So it's actually the inverse of medicine. For 2,800 years since Hippocrates, doctors have been trying to figure out how to make microbes less infectious and less deadly, and developed antibiotics and therapeutics to do that. Well, the guys who are involved in this, there's 36,000 what are called life scientists, but they're actually death scientists, who are now employed full-time in developing, microbes that can be used to kill people.
But given the experience we just had 3 years ago, where a virus from a biolab overturned the world.
Let me just finish this brief history about what happened. In 2014, 3 of those microbes escaped. Fauci built labs all over the country, in Galveston and Boston, everywhere. There are BSL-4 labs. We don't even know how many there are, BSL-3 and BSL-4. We have no idea how many there are. There's, we've counted them. I have a new book coming out that goes through the ones we know. But there are many secret ones that people don't know about, and they're doing it here in the United States. But in 2014, 3 bugs escaped from 3 different labs. And they were high-profile breaks, and they were very dangerous things, smallpox and a couple of other bad microbes. The public learned about it, and there was a lot of publicity, and Congress held hearings. 300 scientists wrote President Obama and said, you've got to shut down Anthony Fauci, because he's going to create a microbe that will cause a global pandemic. And so Obama signed a moratorium that shut down the 18 worst of Anthony Fauci's experiments, where most of them were taking place in Galveston and in North Carolina by a scientist called Ralph Barrick down there. And instead of obeying that law, Anthony Fauci shifted a lot of his operations offshore. And those operations ended up, most of them, in the Wuhan lab, which is a military lab, and that the Chinese run, the People's Liberation Army, and then a lot of them went to the Ukraine. So a lot of that science now, and it's funded, Fauci was funding lots of it, but then the other government agencies began to get confidence in, their ability to get away with it. And most of it is being funded by the Department of Defense. Most of all, the biggest single funder is USAID, which is, a CIA.
Depopulation and eugenics are taboo subjects that provoke horror and disgust in ordinary people with normal values and morals. A glance at history shows that humanity has routinely rejected depopulation programs, like the Third Reich's Nazi eugenics campaign. We understand on a basic human level that no government or unelected globalist organization should have the godlike power of creation and destruction over the human race. But what if I told you the eugenics movement didn't actually die, but simply went underground, where it's remained hugely influential in elite circles, including Fauci, Bill Gates, and Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum. The WEF claims to be committed to improving the state of the world, but there should be an asterisk after that statement. They are committed to improving the state of the world for the lucky few who remain after the great depopulation eradicates 94% of the people the elite consider useless eaters from the face of the earth. As the co-founder of the American Eugenics Society, Frederick Osborne, put it in 1968, eugenics goals are most likely to be attained under a name other than eugenics. More than 60 years after Osborne uttered this statement, the eugenicists have finally achieved their goals. The COVID pandemic and experimental vaccine is simply eugenics under another name. And for years, US taxpayers were paying Dr. Anthony Fauci, the world's most influential death scientist since Joseph Mengele, more money than any other government employee. This tells you all you need to know about the real priorities of Obama and Biden regimes. Here at The People's Voice, we are determined to continue exposing the crimes of the elite. As RFK Jr. hinted, one day these criminals will be held to account, and the punishment will fit the crime. But we need your help to continue red-pilling the masses. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and join the People's Voice Locals community for exclusive and uncensored content and to support the channel. I hope to see you there.